everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Today is March 30th, 2026. And before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. My guest today is the CEO of Sasquatch Resources, a mineral exploration company focused on reclamation of waste rock that is easily accessible, occurs in significant volumes, and can contain potentially economic grades of copper, gold, silver, and other valuable minerals. It's Peter Smith. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, you said it, Jesse. Great intro, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, I am excited to have you also. Now, I'm very much looking forward to diving in to what you do at Sasquatch Resources because it's quite unique within the mining sector. But first, I want to go over the macro setup for some of the metals that you are working with. I want to start with gold because we saw gold drop rather dramatically after the war in Iran started. A lot of people saw gold as a safe haven asset. They assumed if global conflict ramps up, intensifies, that we'll see the gold price rise. That hasn't really played out as people expect. Did that surprise you? And what are your thoughts overall on the gold market for the remainder of 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, great questions. And if I could answer them definitively, of course, I'd be a billionaire. But I'd certainly have my thoughts. On the bull side of gold, of course, war and some economic uncertainty out there, and you're quite right. You would think that we would be seeing maybe a little more interest than we have been over the short term. But there's some bearish stuff going on out there as well. Obviously, with the price of oil spiking as a result of the conflict, you've got inflation fears, which is signaling for potentially higher interest rates, and with that, higher treasury yields, and then of course, kind of underlying those factors, you've got still a strong U.S. dollar. So obviously expensive for everyone who's not holding U.S. dollars to buy gold. So you've got these kind of push-pull factors going on, and maybe again, this is just kind of my view, and I'm not a macroeconomist by any stretch, but you also have some other short-term factors that are potentially lending to a sell-off. In particular, markets are struggling, and so you could have a bit of a sell-off related to forced liquidation of leveraged positions, et cetera. So I think you've got some short-term factors that are preventing gold from kind of continuing its climb, and even having it step back a bit. But if you look at some of the big, far smarter groups out there than myself, J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank, et cetera, a lot of those groups are still holding 6,000 price targets for 2026, and for good reason, because there are a lot of kind of bull factors out there for it. We still have some unpredictability just given the political climate these days. U.S. is seeing some economic downturn, which is going to, I think, lead maybe to some rate cuts in the future, despite the short-term inflation worries. And then the dollar itself, should maybe struggle a little bit again over the short to medium term, just because of some of these poor economic indicators we've seen out of the U.S. So long term and even medium term, I think gold's in really, really good shape. And as I mentioned, there's a couple of short-term factors out there that are getting in the way, I think.
Yeah, great summary. Silver has been on an absolute roller coaster, running all the way up to around $120 an ounce at the start of the year before collapsing famously or infamously, depending how you look at it, dropping 26% in a single trading day. Now we are sitting at around $70, which is still quite impressive when you consider that around the middle of last year, people would call you crazy for saying silver would be at $50. Do you
Sure.
think that $120 level was the top in this bull market, or do you think silver still has legs to run here?
I think it has legs. It's funny, it's a precious metal, so all of the stuff that we were just talking about related to gold still applies to a lesser extent to silver. So certainly some bullish signals there. There's also a supply demand deficit with silver that's kind of well documented. But there's also an X factor with silver, and that's that it has a whole bunch of industrial applications that just go beyond holding silver as as a precious metal. For example, as a conductor for solar and EVs, and of course the whole AI build out. Silver is needed for all those things. It's also a chemical catalyst, which is used to make plastic, polyester, formaldehyde. It's used in optics. It's a great reflector, so they use it for high end telescopes and a lot of other optical um, apparatus, and also and the list kind of goes on and on with silver for medical applications because it's got these great antibacterial properties, and so there's all kinds of different things that silver actually can be used for in the industrial world, on top of its allure as a precious metal as well. So again, you've got the supply demand deficit. So silver should still have legs going forward for sure. Unfortunately, it's a smaller market than gold, of course, and so it's going to be vulnerable to these bigger swings, which of course we've seen.
Absolutely. Now, copper is a metal that also hit all-time highs not too long ago, continuing to show strength at around $5.50 a pound as of the time of this recording. A lot of analysts are projecting massive demand in the face of supply constraints worldwide. What is your current take on the copper market?
Yeah, much more dramatic than silver in this way. There's a big kind of supply demand deficit with copper that's also kind of well known. And contemporary copper projects, they're lower grade. They're more expensive these days, and they take a lot longer to permit than they did even 10 or 20 years ago. So the supply is actually going to struggle mightily to keep up with massive demand because, of course, we use copper and lots of it for almost everything from small scale projects to large scale industrial projects and development. Um, and I'll just tell you a quick story. One of the smartest guys that ever had a privilege of speaking with kind of in person is a guy named Wacom Pilot. Used to be with BMO, and now I believe he still runs Halos. Um, and he was very bullish on copper, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, I've really looked at these numbers and studied them, and he's a very smart guy. And he said this supply demand deficit is scary. And he said, I would not be surprised to see suddenly we're going to wake up one day, and this is going to happen over the space of days, not months, and you might see the price of copper doubling. And that's going to be when essentially we see a major, essentially rut on supply, and that's coming. Some would say inevitable. So copper is a very exciting and also concerning and scary space related to supply demand and of course our need to build.
Well, with gold and silver taking quite a hit in the face of the Iran war, we also saw mining stocks tumble as well in the gold and silver space. Do you think the sector is presenting a buying opportunity at present? And counter to that, could there be headwinds by this inflated energy price at present if these above $100 or around $100 WTI crude prices, Brent, of course, in the same category, continue? Could that perhaps put a damper on the mining sector as a whole?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's some of these kind of macro trends. There tends to be a knee jerk reaction that has a dramatic impact on the junior mining sector, of course, as the kind of point of first entry, so to speak. Um, and when I'm looking at junior mining opportunities and kind of evaluating them, there's really two things that I think you just always have to look at. First of all, the base asset. How substantial is it? What kind of grades are you talking about? Volumes. What jurisdiction is it in? And AppSex. The base asset and those characteristics. I mean, obviously very important. And then the second big factor I always look at is management, and in particular, the track record of management, both in the past with previous enterprises and with the current asset. What have they done with the money that they've had that's already been invested? How have they advanced the asset? Have they done it efficiently? Have they hit their milestones? Um, And I think you look at those two things, and if you like what you see in terms of the base asset and the management team, you almost have to just kind of form your hypothesis based on that and stick with it, because these larger cycles are going to come and go. And I'm old enough to have experienced 3 or 4 of these big cycles, and the key thing I think to remember is these quality assets with good management teams are going to do well in the long run, so long as they can survive the downturns.
Well, let's discuss how Sasquatch Resources fits into the picture. Could you start by giving us an overview of the company?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. When we started looking at our first asset, which is Mount Sicker, about 10 minutes drive from Duncan on Vancouver Island. It's a former mine. It was a mine back in 1900, and we were looking at just kind of reopening the mine. Initially, we like most junior mining companies, we're looking at old mines because they're interesting, and uh, we were up there looking at old drill logs and sampling veins, etc. But every time we went up there, of course, we're looking at the surrounding legacy mine site, and we saw massive piles of waste rock. And of course, we're seeing these things every day, and they're large, and they're just kind of sitting there and very accessible. So we started sampling the waste pile systematically, and small amounts at first, but eventually we sampled it pretty extensively, and we found that the waste pile had amazing grades. And then of course we learned that these waste piles actually, and in the case of Mount Sicker especially, can have a lot of sulfides, which sitting on the surface can do damage to the environment. They leach acid and other contaminants kind of within the pile into the environment. So suddenly for us, the penny dropped. We just thought, okay, here we are. We're trying to do essentially a vanilla exploration project, but really we've got all this high grade waste piled at surface. Why shouldn't we be addressing it and maybe making some improvements to the environment while we're at it? So we turned our focus essentially to become a reclamation company at that point, developing Mount Sicker, of course, but also looking at other potential projects for the pipeline, as we've been adding other legacy mine sites and areas where we're experiencing a lot of mine waste. The great thing about that approach is costs are very low. We're not exploring underground. We're dealing with stuff that's piled at surface. Our approach is essentially to crush and ore sort the material and then sell the high grade at a nearby port. We're about 15 minutes away from a deep water port called Crofton. So in terms of our kind of mining infrastructure, there really is none. We're using a mobile process. We're not creating any new waste at all. And as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, we're actually leaving these sites in a far better state in which we found them.
So, are you strictly looking at reclamation operations here? Are there any plans to do perhaps a conventional mining approach, whether it's on Vancouver Island or any other projects that you have? And what do the economics really look like compared to actually going through and doing a conventional mining operation?
So of course, as we're looking at these old legacy mine sites and looking at kind of waste rock in general, they are always associated with mineralization, of course. So it's kind of a side bonus, so to speak, of what we do. We're in places that are bound to have some decent hard rock opportunities. So we have been looking at that, and we've been doing geophysics and further investigations kind of at the hard rock opportunities all around. It's our intention to probably JV those opportunities to more companies that are more focused on the exploration side. We want to stay focused and kind of stay the course, so to speak, on the reclamation part of this. And the reclamation part, again, it's substantial, and we think the margins are going to be incredible. And again, I mentioned earlier, we're not extracting ore from the ground, and we're not creating a lot of mining infrastructure at all. We're dealing with stuff that is piled at surface. And we're using a mobile and simple process, which has a low cost. At the end of the day, the other thing I'll mention is from a permitting perspective, uh, things become a lot more simple. Again, the pitch that we're making to these permitting groups is, hey, you have a liability, you have a legacy mine site that's dangerous and environmentally hazardous. We would like to go and clean up the high sulfides, essentially remove them and address some of these hazards. Um, and and we're not creating new waste or mining infrastructure while we're doing that. So the permitting perspective gets a lot simpler, and also from the permitter's perspective, they want to see us succeed because they want these liabilities off their books, so to speak.
Can you shed some light on the team behind Sasquatch Resources? And maybe let's start with yourself and your own background and why you're the right CEO to be taking the helm.
Well, I'm part of a team, of course. The core team, I would say, is myself, Mike Raven, who I worked with as a lawyer early days, and Tom Lamb, who I went to law school with back last century. I hate to admit, but myself, Mike, and Tom, we've actually started a few companies together. I co-founded a company called Lesmes Storage, which is a storage company based in Poland, of all places. This is back in 2013, and it was the same team that did that. We ended up, there was an initial investment of about 20 million Canadian. It ended up actually going private, and it is still run by my co-founder, Guy Pinsent, and that company's worth about $500 million now. Very successful with self-storage locations throughout Poland. Same team again, Mike, Tom, and myself. We started Myriad Uranium together. Copper Mountain is the asset in Wyoming. We're going back about 4 or 5 years when we started that company, and it's been a pretty big success. Market cap in the 50 million range, and an incredible asset which we've found with some hard work and a little bit of luck in Wyoming. And so the track record for the team is great, and I would encourage anyone interested in Sasquatch to just look at our past and what we've done. But as well, we've got some like wonderful new people involved in Sasquatch. Uh, Andy Holloway is our engineer and metallurgist, and has just joined the board. This is a guy who's been essentially in the processing side for 30 years, and he's worked with the likes of Glencore and Ocean Partners, and he's going to be the guy that essentially finds us end buyers and creates this high grade product that we're going to be selling from the waste. Justin DeVoe is our really our main prospector, and a guy who knows Vancouver Island very, very well. He's lived here his whole life, and actually is based in Duncan. He knows Mount Sicker better than any other human being, which is obviously a massive help. But also, he's very familiar with a lot of legacy mine sites nearby, and he's helped us secure a lot of our pipeline, which we have. Lou Webster is on our board. He's been a lawyer in Victoria for 30 years, and he kind of knows everybody and has some great connections when it comes to the permitting side and securing the port, for example. Also, Jillian Doucette who founded Synergy Enterprises, essentially represents the environmental side of things, and she's been an environmental expert really for her whole professional life. And she essentially is keeping us on task on the cleanup side and ensuring that everything we're doing is actually going to be both perceived as and actually environmentally sound.
How about catalysts and news flow that's going to be upcoming for the company? What should shareholders and potential investors in the company be looking out for?
Well, we're in permitting at Mount Sicker. So that's our project number one. It's about 300,000 tons or so of pretty high grade waste. I forgot to mention, back when that mine was open, kind of 1895 to about 1915, their cutoff grades for copper were 8%, if you can believe that. So as they're pulling stuff out of the mountain, if it's not obviously at least 8% copper, they were discarding it onto these waste piles, of course, which has become our focus. So we're in permitting there, and that project will take about a year once we actually get going. So assuming we get our permit and operations start, we'll get through that entire waste pile within a year. Right after that is going to be Bluegrass, which is our essentially our project number 2. We have another one called Copper Road. We have another one after that called Santana. And there's another one, and so on and so forth. So we've been able to line up a number of these great waste rock projects, and they all have pretty good economics at the end of the day. So, but permitting at Mount Sicker is going to be first. We've been sampling a bunch of the other ones. We've got results for a number of them, and we're waiting on results for a number of them. So you're going to be seeing news releases related to pipeline projects and what grades are we getting in these waste piles and assessments for volume, etc. The other thing you're going to be seeing news about are potentially MOUs with local First Nations and generally just community support. And I'll mention that it's been great, as you would expect with a project like this. Again, we're going to the local city and the local First Nations and the permitters and the government, and we're saying, hey, we'd love to clean up this big, dangerous, environmentally hazardous mess, which happens to have lots of gold, copper, silver, and zinc. We're not getting a lot of resistance. Again, people are holding us to task, and First Nations in particular have a lot of questions about what is the state of the land going to be when you guys are done? What steps are you going to take to properly rehabilitate this land, and how exactly are you going to make it safe? We've been using experts like O'Kane, for example, who are experts when it comes to mine closure and reclamation. We've been using them, and they've been delivering to us reports and recommendations, etc.
Well, before we wrap up here, is there anything we haven't yet covered? Is there anything you think is particularly important to emphasize to potential shareholders of Sasquatch Resources? What should they be focused on here?
The thing that I love about this project, we been involved in lots of different mining projects and of course self-storage over the years, but this one's different for me in that we are addressing a real environmental issue, as well as these legacy mine sites have real physical hazards that are dangerous. One of the things that really gets me out of bed with enthusiasm each day is the thought that we can make a positive change and address some of these sites. And so we're mining, of course, and I love mining, but we're doing it in a very particular way that I think has to be done more, and potentially is the wave of the future. There's 2,000 legacy mine sites in BC alone. Many of them are going to have dangers and present environmental hazards. And so addressing all of these sites, it's important at the end of the day, So from an investment perspective, that's something you can certainly feel good about. I like our prospects for recovering a lot of gold, silver, copper, and zinc, but I also like our prospects for just making the world a better place at the end of the day. And just lastly, I'll mention, in my opinion, there's not a more efficient way to get critical minerals and other needed elements into the supply chain. At the end of the day, this stuff is piled at surface, and we are not creating new mining infrastructure to access it. We're hydrating it essentially by ore sorting, and then sending it to a facility that's already permitted and already there. So, once we get operational, we're delivering copper to the supply chain in months, and we're doing it without building out a new mine, which is, to me, amazing.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to put links in the description below to Sasquatch Resources website, as well as social media, for people who want to dive deeper into the company. Peter, fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Jesse. It's been a real pleasure. Appreciate it.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.